Hey everyone, it's David Markovich. Here with the 18% video series where we talk about the very unsexy topic about mental health. Today we have Amanda Lipp, a board member of NAMI, a documentary maker, and the founder of Giving Gallery, which is a place where you could purchase art, and 50% or a percentage of the revenue made goes to the artist and the other goes to mental health causes. And today what we're going to talk about is why she got into this field, what her personal experience with mental health, how she got out of it, and some inspiration for some other folks. So could you tell your story? So a little bit about your history and why you got into this field?
Yeah, absolutely, David. Thanks for having me on, by the way. 18% is awesome. It's a great cause and a great place to share your story, meet peers, connect, share resources. So I'm happy to be on and be a part of the movement. My name is Amanda Lipp, as you mentioned, and I have experienced my own experience of psychosis. And it happened when I was 18 years old. I was a freshman in college and was really just going through a big transition from high school, and a lot of the sort of peer pressure and the stress of going into college was put too much demand on the mind. I couldn't meet the demand that really I was going through in my mind. I also was on antidepressants during high school, and I decided to go cold turkey off of those in college my freshman year, which is something that most doctors would not recommend, going completely off of your meds without some sort of regimen. And so that really induced, with combination with the stress and really, experimenting with drugs in college and really just not taking care of my wellness, not eating right, not working out, just the basic needs. And all of that combined together really boiled into this experience of psychosis, which is different for everyone. It can be positive, it can be negative. Mine was actually relatively positive. I had this sort of grandiose, manic, euphoric experience. I had false delusions, false beliefs, or delusions of grandeur, which was really having false beliefs that something was happening when it really wasn't. And then hallucinations, where I was seeing things that weren't really there for other people. It was my own reality, but it wasn't the reality of the rest of the folks around me, which is why it was dangerous, even though I was enjoying myself. And this really kind of spiraled into really spending 3 months in a psychiatric hospital, cycling through ICU, inpatient, outpatient, and really trying to find my sense of self, try to reconcile really the trauma from when I was little. I think that had to do with also not having the best mindset in college, and a lot of that trauma kind of came to the surface during those young adult years. And I joke that the hospital experience, the psychiatric hospital experience, was really the internship of my life, because I hit rock bottom, and it really enlightened me, because I saw what was above me and I saw what was around me in a whole different light, and met the most amazing people who were at their own rock bottom. We helped each other, lift each other to a place where we could cope, recover, find ourselves, and reconcile trauma with hopefully something that was opportunistic.
And did you end up staying in touch with people that you met there?
I did a little bit, but to be honest, it was kind of one of those interesting things where kind of Breakfast Clubby, where it was like you had this special cohort of people where you were there for that particular time period. And then we kind of proliferated and kind of did our own thing. And it's interesting, actually, you mentioned that, because I haven't been back at the hospital. I'm based in Sacramento, and the hospital I stayed at was in Sacramento. I haven't been back to that hospital since I was discharged for 5 years. And I'm actually going back to that very hospital Monday, because I'm working on a project, interestingly, with the hospital. And so it's kind of full circle. And so I'll have to keep you posted and let you know how I feel about revisiting the place that felt so much like a jail, but also so much like a place where I found myself.
Yeah, I guess like with some people, at least what I read, the psychosis is a really terrible experience.
Mm-hmm.
So a hospital could be potentially a safe place. But when
Right.
you're having, quote unquote, the time of your life, then it's like, oh, why are you taking me out of this?
Right.
So maybe that's something. And now you could go back and I think it could be inspiring to go there, even if it's a little bit hard for you,
Mm-hmm.
to show people the success and how you actually transitioned out and lived a functional life.
Absolutely. I think so too. I think it's a great opportunity. And you're right. A lot of people who experience psychosis, it's terrible. It's awful. It's either a one-time thing or it's chronic, it's ongoing. There's voices or delusions that tell you to, to die or to hurt other people or that you're not good enough or that you smell. I mean, all sorts of different experiences. And mine happened to be one where I gave away all my money and I thought that I was on top of the world and I thought that I was on the Truman Show. And it was just a very interesting experience. And it was good in the sense where when I was psychotic, it was, I don't know, I was just in my own world, but then it ended up being a nightmare because I was, brought to a hospital where then the reality hit me hard where it was like, wait a minute, I thought that I was having this sort of breakthrough psychotic reality experience and all of a sudden I'm being strapped down and medicated and told that I'm mentally ill. And then that's when things really hit the fan.
And how long did it take for you to actually believe that you were mentally ill?
It took the whole time in the hospital, honestly. And even a year afterwards, I think just the stigma, the social stigma, the self stigma, looking in the mirror and feeling like I reflected back to society, this mentally ill misfit that was supposed to, have it all, right? I mean, it came from a nice family. I was prom queen in high school. I was supposed to have it all together, and I was like ashamed. So it was really hard to just build an identity more than anything after the hospital.
Yeah, that's probably really tough. Do you want to talk about what your psychosis was about?
Yeah. So if anyone has seen The Truman Show, that's sort of a classic movie with Jim Carrey. It's the best way to sort of illustrate what my psychosis felt and looked like. That movie, if you haven't seen it, The Truman Show, is where the main character, Jim Carrey, doesn't realize that the whole world is sort of watching him and his life. And all of a sudden, he sort of discovers that he is being watched and becomes sort of paranoid and is on this pursuit to sort of discover why that is. And so I experienced a very similar experience where I thought that I literally believed with all my heart that the whole world was watching me and that I was on this sort of show. And I believe that every one of us had to go through that to find their truth and to find their self. So I believed that it was like my turn and that everyone was going to go through this experience. And it was like my turn. And so thinking that everyone was watching me and listening to me, I gave away all my belongings, gave away all my money as a sort of like a statement that I don't need anything. I just need myself. But ironically, in that experience, I totally lost myself and I ended up in a hospital where I was sort of like, wow, joke's on me, right? Like this was my own brain. Like,
But did you think that the hospital experience was maybe part of your delusion where you're like, okay, this is like the end, it's not my turn anymore,
yeah,
and
it
oh,
was.
this is how they stop?
It was a huge reality hit and a huge fall for me because I was, dragged into the hospital. I was taken by a police car and it was like, that's when the paranoia and the bad part of the psychosis hit where it was like, wow,
You failed the test.
I failed the test. Exactly.
Yeah. Um, but that's really interesting. So then you get in there and you're still having delusions?
I haven't had delusions or hallucinations since the hospital experience. I will say that I sort of have sometimes these, because I've experienced that and it is a memory though in my mind, I do sort of have flashbacks sometimes and wonder more in a curious sort of,
Like what was real and what was
yeah,
not?
like sometimes I kind of think like, wow, like what if we really are, I mean, what is reality? Like what if we are being watched? And that's kind of where spirituality and I think just,
But there's actually some of the smartest people that are living right now actually do believe that. So if you read up about simulation theory and
mm,
everything, Elon Musk, that hey, we could all potentially be in a game being
sure,
controlled, and that's a little bit worse than being watched.
right, right.
Um, so that's really interesting. So you're walking down the street during your psychosis, and everyone is playing their part.
Yep.
So
Everyone's
like
playing
the
has their own.
UPS, what?
Yeah, everyone has a role. UPS truck going by. In the Truman Show, there was this sort of cyclical pattern of people playing these roles.
And did you ever feel like you wanted to approach anyone and say, "Hey, how do you think I'm doing?" Or
I did. That's why I sounded crazy, right? That's why when you see people on the streets who are homeless or, even just, acting weird, I have a lot of empathy for them because they're in their own world and it's true for them. And to your point, maybe true in a lot of other senses we don't quite know yet. And And so, yeah, people, and that's when friends started to get worried. I will say that's when a lot of my close friends in college were like, Amanda, like, are you overdosing? Did you have enough sleep? Right. And all these sort of concerns. And that's why it's really important that, you know, friends and family are aware of the symptoms of mental illness and psychosis, because I mean, I looked fine, like I was athletic. I mean, I looked like I had it all together, but I was always, you know, always been kind of a weird, funny girl. So it was kind of like, oh, Amanda's just being Amanda.
Yeah.
You know?
And this time she doesn't like wearing shoes.
Yeah, okay, that's like a new thing. All right, well, you know,
Yeah.
college it's kind of hip to
She's setting another trend.
exactly.
So is that what triggered the authorities to get involved when you approached random people and you're like, oh, how do you think I'm doing? And they're like, we don't know what you're talking about. Like, no, I know, you don't know. And they're like, okay, someone should call someone.
Exactly. Yeah, you're gonna find out soon. Yeah, my friends took me to what's called a sort of a PUF unit, psychiatric hospital facility, which is sort of like a temporary hold where usually a lot of homeless people end up, kind of like a gas station clinic where you drop in, drop out, get your meds. It's not a very sustainable system. And I was taken there. My parents were finally called. They drove up. They were, you know, only a couple hours away. And I was completely still, you know, psychotic and having, you know, delusions and hallucinations. And then my parents had me transported in a police car to a better hospital where then I then stayed for 3 months and attempted to get well. And that's where I discovered art and wellness and expression and found my story and my voice, I guess.
I guess so. Your psychosis wasn't so off because the root of your psychosis was to find yourself, right? That's why
Yeah.
and then it ended up turning into reality that through it, you ended up finding yourself. And you weren't necessarily recorded or everyone, but it was your own journey and you found the silver lining, which is really impressive. And you found the silver lining with people that you could be empathetic to, which most of the world can't. They just don't get it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So you were saying homelessness is a huge problem in New York City where I live.
Yep.
And people talking to themselves, running around, and people are afraid. And even I was reading an article about psychosis from 18%. And it's a very, very small percentage of people that are going through psychosis that are actually violent.
Right.
They're on
Right.
their own journey.
Yep.
Like, I don't think you were kind of in like, you had a better version than most people have. And I wonder, did you watch the Truman Show before this happened? Or did you watch it afterwards?
I actually watched, what was it, Fight Club, which also has kind of an interesting sort of dystopian, you know, sort of higher meaning to it with like being trapped, right, and wanting to get out. And so I hadn't watched the Truman Show. It was maybe like a year or so since I think I watched the Truman Show, but it was, I think, maybe kind of in my mind, and it sort of came through more in the psychosis. Yeah.
And you came through. And then
You're right. I mean, homelessness is a huge problem, and I mean, I think we all have to have more empathy and compassion for not so much what their situation is socioeconomically, perhaps, but at least psychologically, right? And as far as what they're thinking or feeling, and seeing them as a person, you know, I think we have to sort of normalize it in that sense, where we don't know what their socioeconomic status or situation is. We can't assume or really, we can't know that until we talk to them or see their records. But the point is, we want to be kind, right, to each other and be compassionate and not assume that they're a bad person, but that they have a reality that we have to learn and listen to.
Yeah, and actually it's quite the opposite, that they're bad people. At their core, they're a lot of times really good people, because the bad ones are not on the street, right?
Mm-hmm.
The bad ones end up in pretty bad places like jails, institutions. The people that are homeless on the street usually are just pretty passive people that are in a situation that nobody thinks that they could ever end up in.
Right.
But if you count 4 different things that could go wrong in your life to end up homeless, that you would probably figure it out.
Totally. Yeah, I agree. And I acknowledge too that I could have easily been that girl. My parents say, we did a news segment once and they told the reporter, they said, you know, we knew our daughter was spiraling and we thought one of 3 things. We thought she'd end up in a hospital, a morgue, or the jail. And I kind of got the best of those 3 deals, but I totally acknowledge that coming from a good family, having resources, being sort of that kid that had it all, it still happened to me, right? It can happen to any one of us. And it was my reality. And yes, I saw the silver lining. I translated it into a positive thing and used strength-based, you know, mindset, but it was hard and we all have to collectively address.
Yeah, that's great. And when did you start seeing yourself um, get more rooted in reality.
Hmm.
Like, which book do you, was there something that happened that actually triggered that?
A very intuitive nurse walked over to me when I was in the hospital in the inpatient unit and handed me a box of crayons. And that was really a small but really grand gesture that she made. So interestingly, it became a way for me to reconcile the trauma from when I was little and use the medium and the smell and the texture of the crayons as a way of, and so the crayons really became a coping and an expression uh, outlet, and really begin to see pain within beauty, to take my pain and put it in a drawing and then see it and look at it and be proud and be a little bit happier maybe than I was before.
It's great. And I actually saw some of your, and are you selling your art on the Giving Gallery?
Yeah, I am. The Giving Gallery. So that's really what spawned the vision of the Giving Gallery. When I was discharged from the hospital, I began auctioning my art at mental health fundraisers, sharing my story, auctioning my art, speaking around the nation, and really trying to inspire hope with others and be an example and pay it forward. And so the Giving Gallery, that you can visit at thegivinggallery.org, is a place for people to come together as a community, artists to come together and upload their art, sell their art, and then the buyer is able to choose which of our partnered mental health nonprofits gets half the proceeds of the sales.
It's really good. And what type of inspiration could you give to someone that, let's say, went through an episode of psychosis, and now they're kind of like how you were feeling when you got out of it, and you were like, okay, like that just happened. It was
Mm-hmm.
weird. You're like, you're still on the edge. You're like, was that real? Was that not? But you're kind of leaning towards like, okay, that, that was a breakdown.
Right.
But then you're like, well, I have the stigma. It's hard to go reach back out to my friends. Like now you have to go
Mm-hmm.
to your friends and explain to them what happened and see how they react. You have to look
Mm-hmm.
your parents in the eyes and you have to say like, even though it was something that wasn't caused by you, kind of feel like it was your fault. And now you feel like you
Yep.
hurt everyone in this process, scared everyone in this process. So what would happen is normally when you have a lot of those mixed emotions, you end up like getting discouraged to move on,
Mm-hmm.
right? So
Mm-hmm.
you would essentially be like, hey, like this all happened, and then now it's hard to get to the next level because you just had a huge roadblock. So what
Right.
is something that you could say to someone that went through a breakdown similar to yours, because there's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people that go through this a year,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
you've met some of them, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure you, whatever you're about to tell me, you have told to other people.
Right.
So, and or if you haven't, then you should.
Mm-hmm.
So what is some inspiration that you could give to someone to say, like, everything is going to be okay?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great point. I mean, that's the question of all, right? How do you look back at these experiences and make meaning of it and try to see it as an opportunity that's positive while acknowledging the trauma and the pain it may have caused, also seeing some truth and some hope and some opportunity in it. For me, it was sharing my story and well, I'll back up. First, it was about forgiving myself, right? It was about looking at my experience, the trauma experience, what I went through, and first looking in the mirror and saying, Amanda, like, you went through this, right? Like accepting that it happened, embracing that it happened, like I can't go back in time and change that, right? Like I think the first thing is acceptance. And then the second thing for me was forgiveness, looking at myself in the eye and saying, you're a good person, you're kind, like it's okay. And just kind of talking to myself, quite honestly, like as almost like a therapist might. So really it was acceptance, it was forgiveness, and then it was expression, right? Like, how do I want to share my story? And some folks, some cultures don't want to like verbally share their story. Maybe it's through meditation, right? It's sharing your story, spiritually, inwardly. But for me, it was joining NAMI. It was getting involved as a speaker. It was sharing my story. I come from a family of speakers and authors and writers. And so I always found words very peaceful and very calming, and I like educating people. And so going around the nation sharing my story became an outlet for me after I accepted and forgave myself. Crayons, of course, art, and then also picking up a camera and beginning to make documentary films about other people's stories. And that was my way of paying it forward and basically helping other people, like, hey, I have this skill now, you have this story, let's mash it up. I'll have the camera, you have the story, can we make a film about who you are and share it with the world? Are you cool with that? And then from there, I was able to forgive, or I was able to then reconcile with my family and say, like, and kind of prove to myself that, like, I could do it. I could be successful. I transferred back to college, got my degree, joined NAMI as a board member, and really just feel like if I, came out with this as a person who's now able to function and have a quality of life. It's like my goal and my duty, I feel like, in my passion to then do everything in my power to start organizations and businesses and work full time. I've dedicated my life to it. And I think people, but again, I think forgive yourself. And not because it was necessarily that you were sorry or that it was a bad thing. I don't mean forgiveness in the sense where you got your tail between your legs, but forgiveness in the sense that you just acknowledge that it happened and that you're not seeing it as you being a bad or, broken person, and trying to see it as just being kind to yourself, really.
I think it's really good advice. Thank you. And how do people, like, if they want to follow you, get in touch, how do you recommend? And are you open to people that are watching this to reach out to you?
Absolutely. Please reach out. I'm a peer for you. We're here for each other. I think that's so important. I'll be joining 18%, sharing resources, sharing the films that I made recently in New York, actually, about kids that have experienced psychosis, so we can see more stories. You can also go to my website, amandalipp.com. Please join thegivinggallery.org as an artist or as a buyer and support our movement. Of course, if you just type my name into Instagram or Facebook, Amanda Lipp, you'll see it pop up.
Okay. Thank you so much for being on the 18% video series. You're really inspiring. And hopefully people who watch this could relate, get inspired. It doesn't make a difference where they're holding, or even if they have gone or going through what you have, just knowing that you could, and everything ends up being okay.
Yeah, no, thanks, David. 18% is such an important movement for us to talk, discuss, share, whether, whatever our experience is, whatever our cultural background is, however old we are, we're here for each other. And that's the most important thing. We have each other's backs. So thank you for hosting this talk. And I really look forward to learning more and hearing from other folks.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Amanda.